Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are going to continue down the list of the 50 best horror movies that you've never seen, with number 28, I think for us, I don't know anymore. It's 29 on the list, and it's the movie The Funhouse. This movie came out in 1981, and it was directed by Tobe Hooper and written by Lawrence J. Block. For a quick synopsis of the movie, it's centered around 4 teenagers who go to a traveling carnival that happens to be in their town. The 4 teenagers smoke some marijuana and start to go around the carnival seeing all the different sights that there are. It's a pretty rundown, sleazy carnival. They've got some deformed animals that they consider to be part of the freak show. They have a 21 and up tent that is just basically strippers, and they have a couple of different fun rides that the teens do go on. Towards the end of the night though, one of them suggests that they stay at the carnival overnight, sleeping in the Funhouse. The Funhouse is the carnival's scary ride. It's the one where you go in and there's a bunch of stuff that pops out and scares you, and apparently someone last year had just jumped off of the ride halfway through, hid inside of the building, and then just stayed at the carnival overnight. So those teenagers, thinking, well, someone else did it, so we can do it, decide to do just that. They go on the Funhouse ride towards the end of the night, and halfway through, they jump off of their carts, hiding underneath of the attraction and waiting until everyone leaves. They plan on staying in the Funhouse the whole night, but what they don't realize is the Funhouse is also home to one of the carnival goers. One of the people in the carnival wears a Frankenstein mask and only really communicates with grunts and moans, and the Funhouse seems to be the place that he resides. As the teenagers are hiding above him, they're looking through the floorboards down into the little room that this guy has, and they see him talking with the fortune teller Xena and basically asking her for sex. He ends up paying her $100, and when he finishes quicker than he wanted to, she refuses to give the money back, which enrages him, and he ends up killing her. The teens are obviously terrified that they watch this guy out of rage kill one of the other carnival goers, and Conrad, who is the barker for the carnival, comes in to find Xena dead and yells at Gunther, who we find out is like his son, and during their scuffle, he rips off the Frankenstein mask and reveals that Gunther is horribly deformed. He has just jacked up teeth, like a cleft palate, red beady eyes, and like stringy white hair. He is just a terrifying creature. And while Conrad and Gunther are fighting below, one of the teenagers, Richie, drops his lighter that slides through the floorboards onto the ground, breaking up the fight. Conrad now knows though that there is someone watching them who probably witnessed Gunther kill Xena. So now Conrad has to find out who these people are hiding in the Funhouse to get rid of them. So the rest of the movie is these teens navigating their way through this dark and creepy funhouse at night while being chased by Conrad and the deformed Gunther. Conrad does end up getting a hold of Richie and kills him. He's one of the first to die. The other teenagers sort of split up and are trying to find different ways out of this funhouse. Liz chases after Richie's dead body and finds herself falling through a trap door. She ends up in this room with a big industrial fan, and as she's trying to cower away from Gunther, who's like kind of caressing her and almost maybe acting like he's not gonna hurt her, ends up just jamming her head through the fan and killing her. Buzz, the other guy in the group, ends up having a fight with Conrad, which does result in Conrad being killed, but Buzz also ends up dying as well. So Amy, who is our last surviving teenager, who also happens to be like the goody two-shoes of the entire group, she's the one that ends up having to face off alone with Gunther. Although not gonna lie, she did get very, very lucky because she sort of has no survival skills and does a terrible job of fighting for herself. Luckily for her, Gunther ends up getting stuck in between one of the machines underneath of the funhouse that helps run the roller coaster above, and he gets electrocuted while also being grinded apart by the gears that are stuck on his torso. And like literally all Amy does the entire time is sit there and scream and cry while she witnesses this. She's kind of useless throughout the whole movie. But Amy does survive the night, and she walks out of the fun house totally just hysterical and distraught. She turns around one last time, looking at the fun house, seeing the animatronic fat lady at the top, who lets out a cackling laugh before the end credits, which they added at the end to kind of go along with the saying, "It's not over until the fat lady sings." Now, this movie was picked up by Universal, and it was an attempt to try and outdo the Friday the 13th movies that came out right before. The 1980s was a huge time for slasher movies, especially after the success of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, and Friday the 13th. You started seeing these movies just coming out all over the place. So while the Funhouse may have gotten lost in the shuffle, it's still a pretty fun 80s slasher film. Now, granted, this movie doesn't have a high death count and may not seem like a slasher in the same sense of blood and gore, but the tension and pacing is very reminiscent of these slashers. And this was not Tobe Hooper's first time directing a horror film like this. He actually was the director of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And right before he did this movie, he did the 1977 movie Eaten Alive. But it was this Funhouse movie that got him the gig as the director on Poltergeist. So Tobe Hooper is definitely not a stranger to directing horror films, and although this movie might not be one of his most popular or well-known movies, I definitely don't think it's a bad one. Personally, I love any type of scary thing that has to do with circuses and carnivals. I think there's something so beautifully strange about circuses and carnivals, and they bring so much joy to people but can also be turned around and flipped into something so creepy and menacing. So it was really easy for me to enjoy this movie because I just love stuff like that. While I do wish we got a little bit more of the entire carnival cast sort of thrown in there, we really only interact with Conrad, Xena, and Gunther. I still love the characters that we do see and the setup that we have before the teenagers stay overnight. Tobe Hooper's direction in showing the carnival and the pacing in which he does really helps build the suspense. It helps you lay your ground so you kind of see and know where these people are in life, and it really helps set the mood for the entire movie. I do think there is more that they could have done with the whole carnival theme. Sort of focusing it around the deformed Gunther wasn't the approach I was expecting this movie to take, but it also wasn't a bad thing. Because going too far into that carnival scare can also be sort of cheesy and lame, and there was a lot of competition at the time, so it was important to try to do something that was totally off the wall, like having Gunther be revealed as being this deformed and horribly disfigured person. Which I found out that they chose the Frankenstein mask for Gunther to wear strictly because Universal owned the image rights to Frankenstein and they knew they wouldn't get in trouble for using that mask. But this is definitely one that I would say is more like a campy horror movie. It has low lighting and almost like a gritty feel to it, and when you're watching these people perform their different carnival tricks, it definitely feels like a sleazy 80s carnival. We do see the teenagers get their fortunes read by Xena. They go to a magic show where the magician is like drinking and smoking while doing his performance. You definitely get an unsettling feeling just watching them go through this carnival, and it's a great place to set up a horror movie, let's be honest. It had very mixed reviews when it came out and still sort of has mixed reviews today. Some people say it's a very unoriginal, uninspired idea. Some people say that the tension and the lighting is very nice, that the scares themselves might not be super traumatizing, but the atmosphere that you get with this movie really makes for a good experience. And I can agree with both. It's not a movie that's going to really scare you, but it's definitely a fun horror movie. It's got some great little quips in it, and you get to see so many boobs. I know I haven't talked about boobage for a while on my channel. We just haven't had a lot of good movies with a good amount of boobs in it, but we get boobs in the first scene in this movie. And not just any boobs, we get soapy boobs, soapy shower boobs. And then of course we have the 21 and up tent with the strippers, who were real strippers from Miami, Florida, who just came in while they were shooting there. So this movie does check off those standard 80s horror slasher boxes. The teenagers are making out in the funhouse right before shit goes down. They've got some marijuana with them. They're telling stories about people who did this before and it was okay. It checks all those boxes of a fun, good horror movie. So it's definitely one that you will enjoy watching. And while it doesn't have the same level of blood and gore as something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the makeup and the gore that we do get is very well done because it was done by Rick Baker, who is one of my favorite special effects makeup artists. He has done just countless projects. I've talked about him before on my channel. He actually was supposed to play Gunther, which I'm a little bit disappointed he didn't, but the guy that they got to play Gunther instead did a fantastic job. And the guy who played Gunther was Wayne Doba. He was actually not an actor at all. He was a mime that Tobe Hooper saw and thought he did a really good job and got him to play this role. So Rick Baker didn't have to put on the makeup as Gunther, but again, I would have loved to have seen that. But I even found an article from the New York Times that came out the day after this movie was released in theaters, and even that article is sort of just haphazard in how it talks about the movie. It literally has a quote in there that says Tobe Hooper was in there trying. So it shows that, yeah, this movie may not be the scariest and most groundbreaking horror movie out there, but you can tell that time and effort went into it. People had a good time doing it, and it's really not that bad of a movie to just sit down and watch it and enjoy it for what it is. And like I said, if it wasn't for this movie, Tobe Hooper might not have ever gotten his job on Poltergeist. That was the big reason he got the ability to work on the Poltergeist movies, was because of the Funhouse. And a fun, interesting little tidbit we kind of get in this film is during the magician scene when they're watching the magician do his act, he puts someone in the audience into a coffin and starts to talk about Vlad the Impaler. He gives a little monologue about Vlad the Impaler and how after torturing so many men and women in a device similar to the one he just put that person in, he also decided to then change his name to the now infamous Dracula. We learn that Dracula actually translates to son of Dracul, who Dracul was Vlad the Impaler's father, and in Romanian Dracul means the devil. It's derived from the Latin term that means dragon, which dragons were very commonly associated with the devil, which is why they're sort of interchangeable at this point. But pretty much changing his name from Vlad the Impaler to Dracula roughly translated to the son of the devil, which he felt was a more fitting name for himself. That is all a true story on how Vlad the Impaler became Dracula and the namesake of how we got to Dracula. So I thought that was interesting that they took their time to do their research and to give you this like historical monologue that actually has some truth to it and still stays within that sort of creepy, suspenseful tone that they're trying to build in this movie. Maybe not the most exciting scene, but I thought the history lesson was interesting and I appreciate that they actually told you something truthful. So this is definitely one of those movies I think deserves to be on the list. It's not going to be the most terrifying horror movie that you're ever going to watch, but it's definitely a fun, campy 80s horror film. You'll never recreate the magic of Friday the 13th or Halloween, but movies like this still are fun to watch. As for the gore rating on this film, I'm gonna have to give it a gorgeous rating, mainly because there isn't a ton of blood and gore. We get more of it towards the end when the real killing starts to happen, but Tobe Hooper used a lot of low lighting, so it's very dark in those scenes. We don't get to see a lot of it. It's definitely not the same as other slasher films at the time. The makeup is done beautifully. Of course, Rick Baker kills it as always, but it's definitely not hitting that same 80s slasher level. But I would love to know what you guys think. Have you seen this movie? And if so, do you think it deserves a spot on this list? I'd love to know why or why not. You can leave a comment down below or head over to my Instagram, What a Horror. I'm making a post about this video as well. And as always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to see new videos because I put out new videos every Friday. And until next time, stay spooky.